Okay, so you want to own a recycling business. You find a location, set up the facility, take in materials that people throw away, and sell them again. Society generates mountains of waste every single day. Manufacturers need raw materials, and you sit right in the middle making money from both sides of the equation. That is the pitch. And it sounds at first glance almost too obvious. You get paid to take something nobody wants, process it, and sell it to someone who does. The raw material is essentially free. It rains down on you every single day without stopping. How could this not work? Here is the thing. The United States waste and recycling industry hit over $104 billion in revenue in 2024, according to the Waste Business Journal, a massive industry. And yet, across that same industry, you find recycling businesses struggling with margins so thin that a single bad quarter can push them into the red. You find municipalities paying to have their recyclables hauled away, when 2 decades ago those same municipalities were getting paid for them. You find small operators who built what looked like a perfectly sound business, only to watch a shift in a commodity market thousands of miles away destroy everything they built in a matter of months. So the question is real. If recycling is such an obvious business, why is it so hard to make money at it? Where does the money actually come from? What does it cost to run one of these operations? And what is the difference between the recycling businesses that succeed and the ones that fold? That is what we are going to walk through today. And the most important thing I can tell you up front is this: almost nothing about the economics of recycling is obvious from the outside. Let us start with what a recycling business actually is, because most people have the wrong mental model entirely. When you picture a recycling company, you probably picture this. Material comes in the door, someone processes it, and it goes out the door as something valuable. Simple. But there are actually 4 very different things a recycling business can be. You can be a collector, meaning you drive around and pick material up. You can be an aggregator, meaning you consolidate material from multiple sources. You can be a processor, meaning you run raw material through machines that sort, clean, and compress it into something manufacturers can use. Or you can be a manufacturer yourself, turning that processed material into a finished product. Each stage looks completely different on the inside. A collection business is essentially a logistics operation. A processing facility is essentially a small manufacturing plant. The closer you get to turning raw waste into something a factory can use immediately, the higher the price you can charge. But also the more capital you need, the more things that can go wrong, and the more expertise required to do it properly. Now, there is another thing most people get wrong about recycling revenue. People assume the only way a recycling business makes money is by selling recovered material. That is not true, and understanding this distinction is probably the most important thing you can learn about this industry. There are multiple ways money comes in the door. You can sell whatever commodity you have recovered. Cardboard, aluminum, plastic, steel. That is the obvious one. But you can also charge collection fees to the businesses and municipalities you pick material up from. You can charge what is called a tipping fee or gate fee, which is money paid to you simply for accepting material at your facility. Landfill tipping fees in the United States average around $55 per ton. Recycling processing gate fees range from a few dollars per ton up to over $70 per ton depending on the region. You can also sign contracts with municipalities to manage their recycling programs for a fixed management fee. Here is the critical insight. A recycler who gets paid $50 or $60 per ton just to accept material has a fundamentally different business than a recycler who collects material at their own expense and sells what they recover into a volatile commodity market. In the first model, a significant portion of your operating costs is covered before you have processed a single pound of material. In the second, you need the commodity price to be high enough to cover everything: collection costs, processing costs, overhead, debt service, and still leave something for yourself. Getting paid for the input can matter more to your survival than getting a high price for the output. That is one of the central truths of this business. Now let us talk about where the money actually goes, because this is where most people's picture of a recycling business falls apart. Imagine a pile of cardboard sitting behind a grocery store. That pile is not worth anything yet. Before it has any commercial value, you need to find it, schedule a pickup, drive a truck to it, load it, drive it back to your facility, unload it, inspect it, sort out contaminated material, and then process what is left. Every one of those steps costs money, and the step that surprises most people is the very first one, just moving the material from where it is to where you need it to be. Transportation is typically the single largest operating expense in a collection-focused recycling business. According to the American Transportation Research Institute, the average cost to operate a single commercial truck in the United States hit $2.27 per mile in 2023, and $2.34 per mile in 2025, the highest figure ever recorded. That number covers fuel, tires, maintenance, driver wages, insurance, and depreciation. Fuel alone is about a third of that. Driver wages are another big chunk, and then you have insurance, repairs, and the cost of the truck itself. Now think about what a recycling collection route actually looks like in practice. You are not driving a single truck from point A to point B on an efficient straight line. You are stopping at dozens of locations, loading relatively small amounts of material at each stop, dealing with traffic, dealing with access issues at loading docks, dealing with the time it takes to physically move material from a dumpster into the truck, and when the route is done, the truck has to come back empty. That return trip costs you just as much per mile as the loaded trip, and you are not making $1 on it. Here is a simple comparison that makes this concrete. Take two recycling processors, both handling 100 tons of material per day. One of them has their suppliers clustered within about 10 to 12 miles of their facility. The other has suppliers spread out over a 65-mile radius because that is the territory they have built their business in. Same material, same processing equipment, same selling price for what they recover. But the first operator might run 3 trucks to collect that 100 tons, covering around 180 total miles per day. The second operator needs 8 trucks, covering close to 900 miles. At roughly $2.30 per mile, the first operator is spending around $400 a day on transportation. The second operator is spending over $2,000 a day. Both of them process the same 100 tons. But on transportation alone, one of them is spending $16 more per ton than the other. In an industry where margins are often in the range of $15 to $40 per ton, that gap can be the difference between a profitable business and one that is quietly losing money on every load. Route density is not a minor operational detail. It is one of the most important economic variables in the entire business. If you're finding this useful, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It genuinely helps more people find this kind of content, and we have a lot more on the economics of running real businesses coming. Now we need to talk about something that most people who have not run a recycling facility would never think about. It is called yield, and it is where a lot of money disappears silently. When a truck pulls into your facility and dumps its load, not everything on that truck is going to become a sellable commodity. In a single stream recycling operation where everything goes into one bin and gets sorted at the facility, a realistic mass yield is somewhere around 75%. That means for every 100 tons that come through your gate, only about 75 tons becomes something you can actually sell. The other 25 tons are contamination, things that were put in the recycling bin that should not have been, food-contaminated packaging, material that is too degraded to process, or things that are technically recyclable but have no active market. That residual waste does not just disappear. You have to load it back onto a truck and pay to have it disposed of, usually at a landfill. And landfill tipping fees are not free. You are now paying to get rid of waste you originally thought you were going to sell. Think about what that does to your numbers. If you are selling recovered material at $80 per ton, and you start with 100 tons but only get 75 tons of sellable output, your effective revenue per inbound ton is $60, not $80, and then subtract the disposal cost on the 25 tons you have to landfill. Suddenly, your revenue per inbound ton looks a lot less attractive. And if that incoming contamination rate gets worse, maybe you get only 60% yield instead of 75%. That double penalty hits you harder. You lose more sellable material and you pay more in disposal fees simultaneously. The important thing is that contamination is not a problem you can fully control. You can educate your suppliers. You can inspect loads and reject the worst of them. You can invest in better sorting equipment. But at the end of the day, you are processing material that came from thousands of different people who made thousands of different decisions about what to throw in the bin. Some of that material is going to be wrong. The question is how wrong and what it cost you. And here is the part that makes this even more complicated. Even your 75 tons of good material are not guaranteed to sell at the same price from one month to the next. This is the commodity price trap. It is the structural feature of the recycling business that has destroyed more operators than any other single factor, and it is the one that is hardest to see until it hits you. Most recovered, recyclable materials trade as commodities. Old corrugated cardboard, scrap steel, aluminum, plastics. Their prices move the same way oil prices move. They are driven by global supply and demand, and the person running a recycling facility in Ohio has essentially no control over any of it. Aluminum scrap prices spiked dramatically in 2022 as global supply tightened after Russian sanctions following the invasion of Ukraine, then fell back through 2023. Steel scrap prices in the United States ranged from around $350 per ton to over $700 per ton within just a 2-year window. Old corrugated cardboard can swing from over $150 per ton in a strong market to nearly nothing in a weak one. When prices go up, everyone benefits. When prices go down, the recycler's costs do not go down with them. Your lease does not get cheaper. Your truck payments do not get cheaper. Your driver wages stay the same. Your equipment debt does not shrink. Only your revenue falls. If your all-in processing cost is $65 per ton and you are selling at $140 per ton, you are making $75 per ton and life is good. But if that commodity price falls to $45 per ton, you are losing $20 on every load you process. And you cannot just stop processing because your fixed costs, lease, debt, staff, keep accruing whether material is moving or not. This is what happened to dozens of American recycling operations in 2018 when China implemented its national sword policy. China had been the largest buyer of American recyclables for decades. In January 2018, China effectively banned imports of most types of mixed plastics and mixed paper, and imposed a contamination standard so strict that most American-generated material could not meet it. Overnight, the market for a huge portion of what U.S. recyclers were producing disappeared. Revenue from recycled commodities dropped by roughly 50% for many operations according to industry analysis from that period. Facilities that had been profitable for years suddenly found themselves paying to get rid of material they used to sell. Some municipalities started sending recyclables to landfills because there's no other option. Companies renegotiated contracts, raised fees, and in some cases closed entirely. The crisis did not come from anything those operators did wrong. It came from a policy decision made in Beijing, and there was nothing they could do about it. That is commodity risk, and it is baked into this business in a way you cannot engineer your way out of entirely. Now let us talk about what it actually costs to build the physical infrastructure for a recycling operation, because this is the part that shocks most people when they start doing real research. A small, basic recycling facility, the kind that might handle 10 to 15 tons of material per day with minimal automation, can cost somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million to set up, including the building, the basic equipment like a baler and a forklift, and the site preparation. That sounds manageable, but a modern, fully equipped material recovery facility that can handle 100 tons per day or more, with automated sorting equipment, optical scanners, conveyors, shredders, and everything else you need to process mixed material efficiently. According to data from industry presentations at Waste Expo, a typical fully equipped facility of that scale averages between $20 million and $30 million to build and equip. Equipment costs alone are roughly half of that total, and the equipment list is not short. You need horizontal balers that compress material into shipping-ready bales. You need conveyor systems to move material through the facility without labor having to physically carry it everywhere. You need magnetic separators to pull out ferrous metals. You need eddy current separators for non-ferrous metals like aluminum. You need optical sorters that use near-infrared technology to identify and eject specific types of plastic at speeds a human sorter could never match. You need screens and trommels to separate by size. If you are handling plastic, you may need washing lines. All of this is expensive to buy, expensive to maintain, and expensive to repair when it breaks down. And here is the economic trade-off that every recycling operator has to face. You can run a low-capital operation with minimal automation, relying more on manual labor to do the sorting. Your upfront cost is lower, but your labor cost per ton is higher, and your sorting quality is lower, which means your contamination rate in what you sell to buyers is higher, which means buyers pay you less or reject loads entirely. Or you can invest in the full automation package. Your upfront cost is much higher, and now you need to process high volumes of material just to service your debt. If your volume drops, your fixed costs do not, and your per-ton economics get ugly fast, neither option is obviously correct. The right answer depends on your volume, your material mix, your geographic market, and what buyers in your region are paying. But the choice is real, and getting it wrong is expensive. So let us put all of this together into the numbers that actually determine whether you make money. 3 numbers drive this business. Revenue per ton, everything coming in divided by every ton processed, including commodity sales, tipping fees, and service fees. Variable cost per ton, everything that changes with volume, fuel, power, residual disposal fees, consumables, and fixed cost per ton, your overhead divided by your volume, lease, debt payments, staff, facility insurance. The profit equation is simple. Revenue per ton minus variable cost per ton minus fixed cost per ton equals profit per ton. What makes this interesting is what happens to fixed cost per ton as volume changes. Say your facility carries total fixed costs of $650,000 per year. At 10,000 tons annually, your fixed cost per ton is $65. At 25,000 tons, it drops to $26. Same facilities, same lease, same debt, but your profit per ton has jumped by $39 purely from throughput. The fixed cost structure rewards volume heavily. A facility running at 40% capacity is not just losing 40% of its revenue, it is carrying 100% of its fixed costs across 60% of the tons, which makes the economics dramatically worse than the revenue shortfall alone would suggest. Different materials also have completely different economics, and this is where most outsiders make a big mistake in evaluating recycling opportunities. Aluminum is the gold standard. The spread between what you pay to collect and process aluminum and what manufacturers pay for it is large, because manufacturers of aluminum products have a strong economic reason to prefer recycled aluminum over making it from scratch. Producing aluminum from bauxite ore requires enormous amounts of electricity. Recycling aluminum requires roughly 95% less energy. That energy saving translates into a price premium for recycled aluminum that makes the business case strong. Aluminum scrap was trading between 25 and 50 cents per pound in 2023, and while that fluctuates, it rarely goes to zero. Steel and ferrous scrap are high volume, lower margin, but remarkably consistent. The processing is relatively simple, magnets do most of the work, and there is always industrial demand for scrap steel. Prices swing as we discussed, but the underlying demand from steel mills is durable cardboard, meaning the kind from boxes is the workhorse of the recycling industry. It is dense when baled, buyers are everywhere, and collection volumes are massive thanks to the explosion of e-commerce. The margin per ton is not huge, but the volume is so reliable that it forms the economic backbone of most commercial recycling operations. Plastics are where things get complicated. High-density plastic bottles, the kind used for milk jugs and detergent containers, have reasonably good markets. Clear PET bottles used for water and soda are in demand from manufacturers who use them to make new packaging. But mixed plastics, the stuff that does not fit into those clean categories, is often nearly worthless, or worse, a net cost to process because the disposal fees on the residual exceed any revenue from the small amount of usable material recovered. Glass is a particularly difficult story. It is heavy, which makes transportation expensive. It breaks into tiny shards that contaminate other materials and cause significant equipment wear. The price per ton is extremely low, sometimes close to zero in markets where no nearby glass processors exist. Many recycling programs in the United States have quietly stopped accepting glass, not because it cannot be recycled, but because the economics do not work for the facility processing it. Electronics are the opposite extreme. Precious metals and circuit board content e-waste can be worth thousands of dollars per ton. But e-waste processing requires specialized equipment, trained labor, and significant regulatory compliance around hazardous materials, particularly the lithium-ion batteries that have caused serious fires at multiple facilities when damaged. The most important insight here is that a higher price per ton does not automatically make a better business. A material worth $60 per ton that is dense, easy to collect, relatively clean, and in consistent supply can generate more reliable cash flow than a material worth $400 per ton that is scattered, contaminated, expensive to sort, and whose price swings wildly. Now let us talk about the risks that can bring a recycling business down. Because profitability on paper is not the same as survival in the real world, equipment breakdowns are one of the most underappreciated risks. When your primary baler breaks or your optical sorter goes down, you are not just losing throughput, you still owe your lease payment, your staff is still showing up expecting wages, the revenue stops, the costs do not. A major equipment failure at the wrong time, during a period of already thin margins, can push a cash-tight operation into insolvency. Spare parts for specialized recycling equipment are not always off the shelf, and lead times for certain components can run weeks. Cash flow timing is another problem that catches operators off guard. You process material this month, bale it and ship it, and then your buyer pays you in 60 to 90 days. Meanwhile, you are paying drivers weekly, fuel monthly, your lease monthly, your equipment debt monthly. There is a structural mismatch between when cash goes out and when cash comes in. A business can be genuinely profitable on an annual accounting basis and still run out of cash in a given month because receivables have not cleared. That is not a theoretical risk. It has ended real companies. Environmental liability is the risk that does not show up in projections until it is too late. Lithium-ion battery fires at recycling facilities have become significantly more common as those batteries have spread